Hi, everyone. This is Mr. Wiz reading your quiz for today. Structure point of view quiz for Unit 3, Lesson 5 of Language Arts. This is a multiple choice and short answer quiz. Please take your time, read the poem, and then answer the questions all carefully below. At any point, if you need to pause the quiz to think, you may do so and press play when you're ready to resume. Feel free to also listen to the poem more than once before answering questions. Our poem today is called Casey at the Bat by Ernest Thayer. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2, with but one inning more to play. And then when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of that game. A struggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to the hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought if only Casey could but get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a Lulu, and the latter was a cake. So upon the stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted, and the men saw what had occurred, there was Johnny safe at second, and Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley, it rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was an ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was a pride in Casey's bearing, and a smile on Casey's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then, while the writhing pitcher grounded the ball into his hip, defiance flashed in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood watching in the haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches, black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him, kill the umpire, shouted someone from on the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and an echo answered, "Fraud." But one scornful look from Casey in the audience was odd. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let the ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. The form of this poem is most like a lyric poem, free verse, narrative poem. The poem, Casey at the Bat, is written in blank point of view. First person, second person, third person limited. Find an example from the poem that shows how the crowd feels about Casey. Explain that example in at least one complete sentence. A possible sentence starter, the crowd feels blank about Casey. I know this because the crowd blank when Casey blank. Type your answer here. Find an example from the poem that shows how the narrator, the writer, feels about Casey. Explain this example in at least one sentence. A possible sentence. The writer thinks Casey is blank because he describes him as blank. Again, type your answer here. Which of the following best describes the rhyme scheme of the poem? The first and last two lines of each stanza rhyme A-A-B-B. The first three lines of each stanza rhyme A-A-A-B. The poem does not rhyme. Stanzas 11 and 12, starting with the word fraud, lines 33 through 40, are important to the story because they introduce the setting of the story, they describe the change in Casey's character after two strikes were called, they describe how the crowd turns against Casey. The crowd expects Casey to be their hero. Is he a hero? Why or why not? Use examples from the poem to support your answer. This needs to be at least 3 sentences. Type your answers here. When you're finished with the quiz, go back through the questions to make sure that you answered all of them correctly. Make sure that you answer all of them, and then click submit and you will be finished with the test.